My name is Mason Ryder, and 6 months ago I was supposed to marry the woman I thought was my forever, Aria Calloway. It's strange how the destruction of a life you spent years building can start with something as simple as a swipe. I wasn't even supposed to be on that app. A friend from work had convinced me to sign up so I could help him figure out how the filters worked. It was a slow afternoon, one of those lazy Fridays where the coffee's gone stale and the air conditioning hums louder than anyone's ambition. I remember scrolling through profiles, laughing at some, shaking my head at others, until I saw her. Not just someone who looked like her, not a doppelganger. Her, Aria, in a photo I had taken during our weekend getaway to Big Sur. The background was unmistakable, the wooden deck, the sunset, even our dog Scout curled up by the fire pit. And her laugh, that full-bodied, throw-your-head-back kind of joy, frozen in pixels. But the name? Alyssa Reed. And the bio? That did it. Single. Looking for husband material. No drama. Just someone who matches my energy. I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. I blinked hard, like I was trying to unsee it. I clicked the profile, half hoping it would vanish or be a prank. But it was her. Our home, our dog, her favorite mug in one photo, her wearing my old college hoodie in another. It wasn't a fake profile made by someone else. It was hers. Active. Swiping. Searching. And apparently, I wasn't what she wanted. Or maybe I was just convenient until something better came along. I didn't say a word that night. She came home late, said it was a marketing team happy hour, gave me a kiss on the cheek, poured herself a glass of wine, and complained about how her manager never listens to her ideas. I nodded, heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I studied her face as she talked, her eyes, her mouth, her casual way of existing beside me like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't somewhere else online, offering herself up like a free agent, a woman still shopping for better while engaged to me. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone at the wall or hold it in her face and demand she explain why the hell she would do that. But I didn't. I went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from fear, but the kind born of clarity. That sudden, cold, surgical silence that slices between what you believed and what's real. She didn't love me. Maybe she once did. Maybe she convinced herself she did. But not anymore. And I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I'd already paid for. That night, I lay next to her in bed and stared at the ceiling while she drifted to sleep with a sigh, her back turned, her breath soft and even. I memorized that moment. The way betrayal doesn't always come with fireworks or fists, it sometimes comes wrapped in routine, disguised as normal. In the morning, she made pancakes. My favorite, with cinnamon and blueberries, the way I taught her. She kissed me on the shoulder and asked if I wanted almond milk in my coffee. I nodded, took the mug, drank it in silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because nothing I could say would unwrite what I'd seen. For the next week, I played my part. I helped her choose linen colors and replied to her forwarded emails from the planner. I asked her about bridesmaid dresses and nodded through conversations about guest lists. She smiled at me like I was the dream. And maybe I had been for a while. But something had shifted, and no wedding could fix it. Love isn't a contract or a calendar date. It's presence, consistency, integrity when no one's watching. And hers had all expired the moment she uploaded that bio. What cut deepest wasn't that she was on the app. It was what she wrote. No drama. Just someone who matches my energy. Like I'd been the anchor holding her down. Like my stability had somehow become dull. I started to look back and notice all the moments I'd ignored. The late nights that didn't add up. The birthdays she forgot. The cold distance when I talked about long-term plans. She'd been slipping away long before that profile. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I wanted the version of her who curled into me on rainy nights. The version who whispered dreams into the crook of my neck. The one who once looked at me like I hung the damn moon. But she was gone. Replaced by someone curated, filtered, digitized for strangers. I never told her I saw it. I never gave her the satisfaction of knowing she broke me. I let the silence stretch between us like a thread pulled too tight. And in that quiet, I started planning my exit, not as revenge, but as resurrection. Because if she could market herself to the world as single while sleeping next to me, I owed it to myself to reclaim whatever pieces of me I still had left. The next time she asked me if I was okay, I smiled and said, just tired. And maybe I was. Tired of carrying a love she had already left behind. Tired of being the placeholder in a life she clearly wanted to rewrite. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it whispers through carefully staged photos and catchy taglines. But it breaks you all the same. And once broken, something inside you changes forever. Most people would have yelled, demanded answers, shoved the phone in her face, and asked her what kind of twisted game she thought she was playing. But I wasn't most people, and I knew shouting wouldn't unmake the truth. I didn't want to hear her explanation, not when I already had the evidence. So I did something colder than confrontation. I started dismantling the wedding from behind the scenes. Quietly, carefully, like peeling back a wall I once helped build with my own hands. The first call I made was to the florist. I remember staring at my laptop screen, the pastel mood board still open, her notes about wanting peonies and soft lighting to make it feel like a spring dream. I pressed the phone to my ear and heard a bright voice greet me. Blush and bloom events. How can I help? My mouth was dry. I swallowed and forced my voice to steady. Hi, this is Mason Ryder. We had a May 18th wedding scheduled under Aria Calloway. There's been a family emergency. We need to cancel, indefinitely. The pause on the other end felt like a verdict. Oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that. Would you like to reschedule? I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. No, just cancel. Keep the deposit. That became my mantra. Keep the deposit. Over the next 48 hours, I made a list of every vendor, every contact, every person who needed to know that this fantasy was dead. The band, the bakery, the photographer. I even called the venue. Some glass-walled monstrosity Aria had fallen in love with because it had a bride suite that looked like a castle. I called them at lunch, sitting alone in my car, watching the city blur past the windshield as if it didn't care I was unraveling. I told the coordinator the same thing. Family emergency. No new date. Just gone. And the strangest thing? They all believed me. My voice was calm. Kind. I thanked them. I apologized for the inconvenience. They had no idea I was trying not to fall apart on the other end of the line. But they didn't hear the cracking silence in my chest or the way my fingers gripped the steering wheel like I was bracing for an impact that had already happened. Aria didn't notice. That was the part that almost amused me, if anything about it could have been funny. She was too busy, working late, her new favorite phrase. Every night that week, she came home an hour or two past the time she said. She blamed meetings, client dinners, brainstorm sessions with her team. I didn't question it, didn't raise an eyebrow. I let her talk while I nodded and stirred a pot I had no appetite for. I even asked about the guest list, just to keep up the illusion. Your cousin Everly, did she RSVP yet? Aria barely looked up from her phone. I think so. I'll check later. She smiled, kissed me quickly, and disappeared into the bedroom. Probably to message her latest test subject. The irony wasn't just bitter, it was surgical. I had already paid for most of the wedding. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to. I believed in building our future. I believed in showing up and investing in forever. I'd written checks with a heart full of love and a blind eye to the cracks forming under my feet. And now, with each call I made, I was unwriting that future one vendor at a time, dismantling it like a set that never made it to opening night. Every canceled contract felt like pulling a piece of myself out of the wreckage. Not violently, just precisely. Like I was performing emotional surgery with no anesthesia. And somewhere in the mess of it all, I realized something important. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy, a boundary, a form of power I'd never understood until now. The Mason she remembered, the one who would have been over backward to fix it, who would have rationalized her betrayal, he was dying. And in his place, I was becoming someone who didn't need to be chosen to have value. Someone who didn't beg to stay in a room where his love was treated like a placeholder. One night, about a week into the unraveling, I sat on the couch and watched her from the corner of my eye. She was on her laptop, probably editing the seating chart, humming to herself like everything was perfect. Our dog Scout rested at her feet. The same dog in the profile picture she'd posted under the name Alyssa Reed. It was almost laughable. She'd kept pieces of our real life in her lie. Like she wanted to pretend she was still grounded in something real while advertising herself to strangers. Like she wanted the security of our life with the thrill of someone new chasing her. I could have ended it that night. Said her name, dropped the truth, watched her crumble. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted her to keep going. Planning. Dreaming. Living in the illusion. I wanted her to believe the wedding was still happening while I erased every trace of it behind her back. I wanted her to wake up to the ruins of what she destroyed, not because I was cruel, but because I needed her to feel what it was like to be blindsided. My silence became my weapon. Not a knife, but a mirror. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let her face what she'd done in the stillness she thought was safety. And in that quiet, I began to hear myself again, the soft beat of self-respect returning. The rustling sound of pages turning in a book I thought we were writing together, only to find out she'd switched genres when I wasn't looking. I started backing up my files, closing joint accounts. I emailed my landlord and asked about early termination options. I even opened a new checking account in my name alone. The pieces were moving, not with chaos, with control. She thought I was distracted, thought I was naive. She had no idea the man sitting across from her at dinner was preparing to vanish. That was the part that gave me peace, knowing I wouldn't have to yell to be heard. She would hear me in the absence, in the void where promises once lived. And one day soon, she would realize that silence, when chosen, is not emptiness. It's closure. She left for her bachelorette weekend in Miami on a Thursday afternoon, full of champagne and lies. She kissed me twice before heading out, one on the cheek, one on the lips. Soft, sweet, practiced. Scout, our golden retriever, barked at the suitcase like he knew something I hadn't said aloud. I just stood in the hallway, holding the door for her, pretending like I wasn't about to turn the entire story on its head. Have fun, I said, and I meant it in the most hollow, detached way possible. Arya beamed. Try not to miss me too much, she joked, tossing her hair as she wheeled her luggage out. She didn't see the look on my face. She didn't ask why my arms didn't reach for her the way they used to. The moment the elevator closed, I exhaled like I hadn't breathed in weeks. It was time. Everything I needed was already packed. 2 duffel bags, 1 roller, and a backpack filled with documents I'd locked away from our shared space weeks ago. My passport, my birth certificate, my laptop, a stack of journals, never touched by her hands. I'd been moving out in pieces, like a man dismantling a bomb wire by wire. All that was left now was the final detonation. The ring was the hardest part. Not because of what it cost, but because of what it once meant. I opened the nightstand drawer on her side of the bed, found the velvet box, and placed the engagement ring inside with care. Then I added something else, something she wouldn't be able to ignore. A letter. 2 pages. Handwritten. Not a goodbye. Not exactly. But a truth she wouldn't be able to outrun. I didn't pour venom into it. I didn't curse or accuse. I just laid out the facts. That I'd seen the dating app. That I knew who Alyssa Reed was. That love isn't a test you give someone you claim to trust. I told her she had every right to wonder what else was out there. And I had every right to walk away from someone who did. I left the letter folded neatly, tucked under the ring box. I placed it on her pillow like a tombstone for a future we'd buried long before this moment. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked back once. The closet she'd stuffed with half-hearted Pinterest dreams. The dress bag zipped and hanging on the bathroom door. The photos still smiling on the wall, refusing to believe they were lies. It didn't feel like my home anymore. Just a perfectly staged scene waiting for its audience to realize the lead actor had exited. I called a car. Not a flashy ride. Just a quiet, reliable SUV driven by a man named Zeke who didn't ask questions when I loaded my bags and told him I had a long ride ahead. Airport, he asked. No, I said. Downtown station. Then I'll switch. He gave me a nod and pulled away from the curb as if I wasn't unspooling the last 10 years of my life in the rearview mirror. We drove in silence for a long while, the Texas sun casting long streaks of gold over the highway. My phone buzzed twice, group texts from her bridal party, emojis and inside jokes. I turned the phone off without reading more. It was done. I was done. There's a strange freedom in disappearing before someone knows you're gone. It's like reclaiming your name, your breath, your worth, all in one quiet vanishing act. At the station, I bought a one-way ticket to Denver, not because I had any ties there, but because it felt like the right distance. A midpoint. A city with fog and steel and enough noise to drown out regret. From Denver, I'd figure it out. A friend of a friend had mentioned Seattle once, said it was a place where people went to start over. That sounded like a promise. A place where no one knew my name or what I'd lost. The ride was long and slow and perfect. I watched the landscape change from familiar flatness to jagged mystery. I didn't sleep much, just leaned against the window and let the rhythm of the tracks carry my thoughts away from Arya, from the wedding that would never be, from the life that had pretended to be love. I kept picturing her walking into the apartment, maybe hungover or sunburned, suitcase wheeling behind her, calling my name. Maybe she'd see Scout first, sitting quietly by the door like something was off. Maybe she'd call out again louder this time. Mason. And maybe, just maybe, she'd start to feel the chill in the air before she even saw the bedroom. She'd find the letter. She'd read it. And for once, I wouldn't be there to soften the blow or hold her hand through the consequence. I would be gone. Not with malice, but with purpose. With clarity. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is leaving when staying would only breed more lies. I'd given her chances to show up. She gave me a profile. A headline looking for better options. In Denver, I stayed one night at a hotel near Union Station, just long enough to shower, eat, and catch my next leg. I booked a ticket to Seattle with no return date. No backup plan. Just instinct. When I landed, it was raining. I took that as a sign. The city welcomed me not with warmth, but with honesty. The streets were cold and wet and unforgiving. But they didn't lie to me. That was more than I could say for what I left behind. I found a sublet on a forum, a third-floor walk-up from a guy named Cruz who didn't ask why I was traveling light. He handed me the key and told me not to break the radiator. That was the only rule. The place was small, old, and smelled like forgotten curry, but it was mine. I put my bags down, opened the windows, and let the Seattle air bite into me. It was sharp and honest and unfiltered. That night, I lay on a mattress without a frame and listened to the city groan through the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Long, deep, uneven breaths like I was learning how to inhale a life without her in it. I kept replaying the moment I left the ring and let her behind. Not because I doubted it, but because it was the first thing I'd done in years purely for me. I had no roadmap, no fallback, but I had something Arya never gave me: freedom. I didn't just leave an apartment that night. I left a version of myself who tolerated being tested. I left the man who waited to be enough for someone who never saw his value in full light. I left the wedding, the promises, the performance, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally heading somewhere real. Seattle was wet and wide and anonymous, and that was exactly what I needed. Every morning, I woke up to gray skies bleeding across the windows, and I welcomed it like a friend who didn't ask too many questions. The city didn't care who I was. It didn't care what I left behind or who I used to be. It swallowed me whole without a second glance, and for the first time in a long while, I found comfort in being invisible. I rented a sublet from a guy named Cruz who played guitar at all hours and had a cat named Linux that refused to acknowledge my presence. The place smelled faintly of old incense and burnt coffee, but it was mine. There were no framed engagement photos on the walls. No wedding color palettes tucked under the fridge magnets. Just space. And silence. And the hum of a second chance I wasn't sure I deserved. I found temp work at a startup downtown doing back-end systems for a fleet management company. It was the kind of job where no one asked about your past, just your code. I kept my head down, showed up early, and left late. I worked through lunch most days, typing like my fingers were chasing something they couldn't quite reach. My coworkers called me the ghost, not unkindly, just with the kind of amused curiosity people reserve for quiet men with tired eyes and no social media presence. I told them I'd moved from Texas. Left it vague. Said I needed a change of pace. That part wasn't a lie. I didn't cry. Not at first. Not even when I was alone. Not even in the dark. I thought that meant I was strong. I mistook the numbness for healing. But it wasn't strength, it was shock, calcified and rebranded. It took weeks before the silence began to eat at me. Before the questions started circling again like birds over open water. What made her wonder if she could do better than me? Did I stop trying? Did I let myself become predictable? Was I ever enough for someone like her? The loop was vicious. A carousel of self-doubt spinning through my head at night while the city exhaled rain onto the windows. I stopped trusting mirrors. They didn't lie, exactly, but they didn't tell the whole truth either. I'd stare at my reflection while brushing my teeth and wonder who the hell I was now. A man who had once planned a life, a wedding. No. One word. Solid. Clean. Like closing a door with no keys left behind. Take care of yourself, I said. Whatever you're hoping for, you won't find it here. She nodded. Slowly, her chest rising and falling with broken breaths. I never meant to break you, she whispered. I met her eyes one last time. You didn't, I said. I rebuilt before you could even try. I turned then, walked past the cookbooks and children's section, past the couple sipping oat milk lattes and the cashier who suddenly found something very important to do behind the counter. Outside, the rain was still falling, but it felt cleaner now. Honest. I didn't look back. She'd had her 30 seconds. That was more than enough. I walked into Dr. Roya Wallace's office 2 weeks after the bookstore. I didn't go because I was spiraling. I wasn't curled up on the floor sobbing or smashing plates in my kitchen. No dramatic bottom out. I went because I was tired of holding it all alone. Because even silence, when worn long enough, becomes its own kind of screen. Her office was on the second floor of a converted Craftsman near Queen Inn. Soft light, warm wood, no cliché motivational posters on the walls. Just a low bookshelf filled with titles that weren't trying too hard and a worn leather chair that looked like it had carried other people through hell and back. She greeted me without fuss. No clipboard shoved into my hands. No probing questions in the first breath. Just a calm smile and a gesture toward the chair. "You can sit wherever you'd like," she said. That was the first sign she knew what she was doing. Giving me control of something, even something small. I chose the chair closest to the window. Not because I needed light, but because it felt like I could look out and remind myself the world was still moving. She didn't ask me about Arya at first. She asked me about me, about why I'd come, about what I hoped would be different if I were to stay. I wasn't ready to talk about the betrayal, not in the way most people expect, but I told her the broad strokes, that I'd left Texas, that I ended a relationship, that I felt hollow, and not because I wanted her back, but because I wasn't sure what version of myself had been left behind. She nodded. No scribbling. No furrowed brow. Just presence. "What did it take from you?" she asked. I remember staring at a ceramic bowl on her coffee table and whispering everything I thought was solid. She didn't flinch. Let's start with that. We met weekly after that. 45 minutes that stretched and compressed time in strange ways. I'd walk in thinking I had nothing to say, and walk out feeling like my chest had been cracked open and rearranged. She didn't dig like a miner. She guided like someone holding a flashlight through a cave I already lived in. Slowly, we unpacked the quiet part of the story, the part that lived under the surface of Arya's dating profile. "Why did her betrayal hit you like that?" she asked one day, not as an accusation, but like a seamstress pulling a thread. "Because I loved her more than I loved myself," I answered before I even knew it was true. I sat in stunned silence afterward, the words hovering like smoke. Dr. Wallace leaned forward, not smug, not surprised. "Just gently pressing, did you?" "Yes," I said. "Completely. I put her needs first. Her dreams. Her doubts. I let mine shrink so she could feel big. I thought that was love. I thought that was loyalty. And how long were you already doubting yourself before she gave you a reason to?" The question stung. Because I knew the answer wasn't weeks or months. It was years. I had been playing the steady one. The reliable one. The man who stayed calm, held things together, who didn't shake the walls even when the roof was leaking. And somewhere in that posture, I stopped checking my own foundations. I stopped asking if I was happy. I only cared if she was. If she felt secure, desired, heard. While I swallowed my own needs like they were selfish indulgences. Arya didn't break me. She confirmed what I feared, that I wasn't enough. And that's what therapy made me confront. I had been handing over my worth to someone else like a receipt, waiting for them to validate the purchase. I had outsourced my self-esteem. And when she failed the test of loving me fully, I assumed I had failed too. But I hadn't. I had shown up. I had loved with both hands. I had stayed true while she flirted with fantasy. And therapy gave me the words I didn't have when I left. I wasn't what was broken. I was what cracked under the pressure of her games. There was power in that sentence. Not vengeance. Not bitterness. Just clarity. We talked about forgiveness too, not as a favor to her, but as freedom for me. Forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about cutting the hook out of me, releasing the grip she still had on my narrative. It didn't come overnight. I wrestled with it. Some sessions, I arrived angry, spitting out sarcasm like armor. Other days, I cried quietly into my sleeve, ashamed of how much I still remembered the sound of her laugh. But each week, I left lighter. Not healed. Not erased. Just reassembled. I started hiking again. Not for fitness, not for distraction. Just to be with myself. To feel the earth under my feet and know it wasn't collapsing. I wrote more, too. Not just journals now, essays. Thoughts on identity, worth, resilience. I posted one anonymously online, not expecting much. It got shared and commented on. Not because it was some literary masterpiece, but because pain recognizes pain. One reader wrote, "I thought I was crazy for still hurting. Thank you for naming it." Another said, You gave language to something I buried. Now I can breathe. Dr. Wallace smiled when I told her. See, she said, the truth doesn't just heal the person who speaks it. It invites others to do the same. And that, more than anything, made me realize why I needed to leave the way I did. Not to punish Arya, but to reclaim the version of me she had slowly chipped away at. Because when you love someone who doubts you, you start doubting yourself too. And that's how erasure begins. Not in a single act of betrayal, but in 100 small moments when your worth is left unmatched. Arya didn't just lie with a dating profile. She lived a lie. A lie that said I was a placeholder. A fallback. The safe choice in a world she still wanted to explore. And therapy taught me something that no closure letter, no final argument, no returned ring could ever give me. The only person who needed to believe I was enough was me. The package showed up on a Wednesday. No knock. No doorbell. Just a dull thud against the floor as I opened the door for groceries and found a brown padded envelope leaning against the wall like it had been waiting there for hours. No return label. No signature. Just my name scribbled in blue ink that looked too familiar to be coincidence. My stomach turned before my hands even touched it. I knew who it was from. I didn't need confirmation. There was a certain gravity to the things we bury that makes their return feel like rust bleeding through paint. You can seal the door, repaint the walls, light candles in every room, but grief and guilt know how to find the cracks. I carried it inside slowly, placing it on the counter like it might explode. Scout sniffed it and walked away, uninterested. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown it out unopened like a symbol, like closure. But I didn't. I stared at it while I unpacked my groceries. The clink of jars, the rustle of paper bags, the hum of the fridge as it kicked back on, none of it was enough to drown out the weight of that package sitting inches from my elbow. I told myself I wasn't going to care. That whatever she sent couldn't change what I'd already rebuilt. But that was a lie. Because curiosity isn't weakness. It's the echo of old instincts. Ones that don't die just because trust did. Eventually, I opened it. Slowly. Deliberately. The first thing I saw was my college hoodie. Navy blue, frayed at the sleeves. The one Arya always stole on rainy days. The one she wore the night we danced barefoot in the kitchen after our engagement. Folded neatly. Too neatly. On top of it sat the cufflinks I wore to my last job interview back in Austin. The ones she had engraved with my initials and a tiny compass rose. I remembered her saying, "So you always know where you're going, even when you're lost." The irony now burned like acid in my throat. Beneath them was a flash drive. Plain. Black. No label. No note explaining what was on it. Just cold plastic, daring me to plug it in and uncover whatever attempt at explanation or redemption she thought I needed. But I didn't. I held it for a second, felt the slight weight of it in my palm, and then placed it on the counter next to the cufflinks. Some truths don't need to be heard again. Some explanations are just bandages for wounds that have already scarred. And some people send closure because they're the ones who need it, not you. Then I saw the note. Small, torn from a notebook. No date. Just 6 lines in handwriting I used to recognize the moment I saw it on a sticky note or a mirror. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve it. I just wanted to feel something, and I didn't realize I was killing everything in the process." I stood there, gripping the edge of the countertop, the cold seeping into my fingertips. She wanted to feel something. That line repeated in my head like a curse. All this destruction, all this undoing of promises. Because she wanted to feel something. I had been her collateral damage. A casualty of her restlessness. Of her inability to sit with contentment without wondering what chaos felt like. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even whisper her name. I folded the letter back in half and placed it inside the hoodie, then tucked it all back into the envelope and slid it under the sink with the cleaning supplies. Somewhere between the bleach and the sponges. Somewhere appropriately sterile and hidden. That's what that part of my life was now cleaned, contained, and stored away. I moved the flash drive to the drawer I used for spare batteries and expired coupons. I didn't throw it away. Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted the choice to ignore it. There's power in refusing to engage. Power in not letting her voice echo again through my laptop speakers. She had said what she needed to say. And I'd already said mine when I walked away and never turned back. The next day, I went for a hike. Discovery Park again. Scout trotted ahead of me, tail wagging, occasionally glancing back like he was making sure I was still there. I was. More than I'd been in years. The air was crisp, and the sun was cutting through the clouds just enough to paint gold across the treetops. I didn't think about the package. Not really. I thought about the stillness, about the trail beneath my feet and the quiet between my thoughts. When I got home, there was a message from Kelsey. I hadn't heard from her since the voicemail weeks ago. I debated letting it sit, unread, but something told me it wasn't more begging on Aria's behalf. I opened it. She's engaged. Some guy named Brandon. 2 months in. Just thought you'd want to know. Hope you're okay. I read it twice. Brandon. I didn't know the name. Didn't need to. 2 months in. That meant they started dating right around the time she sent the package. Right around the time she wrote that apology and mailed me memories like I'd asked for them. She had already moved on. Already chosen someone else to rebuild her story with. And maybe she thought she needed to close the last chapter before starting the next. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I smiled. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted her to hurt too. But because I finally, deeply, understood something. She was never looking for better. She was looking for new. And when you're addicted to the chase, you'll never be satisfied with the man who stays. I sat down with a fresh cup of coffee and opened my journal. I titled the entry Peace. Because that's what it was. Not revenge. Not victory. Just peace. She had rewritten her ending. And I had rewritten mine. Without her in it. No? I drink my coffee alone at sunrise and never apologize for how I like it. 2 sugars, a pinch of cinnamon, whole milk even when almond is trending. There's something grounding about standing in a quiet kitchen while the world yawns into motion, the mug warm in my hands, the silence mine. I don't rush anymore. I don't pour into someone else's cup before checking if mine has anything left. That lesson came hard. But it came. Every third Sunday, I hike. Scout knows the routine now. He waits by the door as I lace up my boots, tail wagging like we've got somewhere sacred to be. And we do. Discovery Park, Mount Si, Rainier when I'm feeling bold. Not because the air fixes everything, but because it reminds me how small everything else is. Out there, no one asks what went wrong. No one knows I was left mid-sentence in a story I thought I co-wrote. There's just dirt, trees, wind, and breath. Mine. Steady again. I started writing under the name Writer M. Essays, reflections, sometimes confessions I don't say out loud. I never attached my photo, never linked to social. But the posts started gaining traction. People emailed, messaged, thanked me. Not because I had the answers, but because I had survived long enough to ask better questions. What does it mean to be chosen? Why do we stay when we're being slowly erased? How do you forgive someone who never apologized the right way? One woman wrote, "You said what I've been too ashamed to admit. I thought I was the only one who kept showing up for someone who was already walking away." Another said, "Your words helped me pack my bags." I never respond directly, but I read every one. Because somewhere in the pain I put to page, other people found a mirror. And I realized I wasn't just healing, I was helping. And not by preaching, just by telling the truth. I still wonder sometimes. Not often, but sometimes, what she was looking for on that dating app. Who she thought she'd find. What she hoped a stranger could offer that I hadn't already handed to her without condition. Maybe she thought magic lived in mystery. Maybe comfort felt like a cage. Maybe she didn't know that the truest kind of love isn't fireworks. It's someone showing up again and again, even when the music fades. But mostly, I wonder why I ever forgot to love myself first. Why I gave so much without making sure she was holding it gently. Why I handed her my heart like a resume, hoping she'd circle the parts she liked and forget the rest. That's not how it's supposed to be. I see it clearly now. Aria didn't cheat in the traditional sense. But she tested loyalty like a game show. She didn't just flirt with options. She fantasized about replacements while wearing the ring I gave her. And when she got scared of the echo, she mailed back my memories like it was enough to redeem the choices that came before. But I'm not bitter. I'm just awake. There's something sacred in realizing you are your own rescue. That no closure letter, no apology, no desperate bookstore confrontation can offer what self-respect already does. I'm not the man who begged to be seen anymore. I'm the man who walks out of rooms where love has to be proven every day just to be kept. The last message I got from Kelsey came a few weeks ago. Just a line. She's pregnant. Thought you should know. I read it over breakfast, in between sips of coffee and slices of sourdough. Scout snored by the window. Rain tapped lightly at the glass. I smiled again. Not out of spite. Not out of regret. Just peace. Whatever version of Aria exists now, wife, mother, dreamer, drifter, I don't need to meet him. I buried mine. And he doesn't haunt me anymore. Sometimes I walk past couples now and wonder what stories are waiting behind their smiles. I don't envy them. I don't pity them. I just hope they're honest with each other. I hope someone's not secretly swiping in the dark while the other folds laundry and believes in forever. To anyone reading this, anyone who's been tested, betrayed, replaced, or quietly diminished, don't fight to be kept. Don't set yourself on fire hoping they'll finally feel warm. Walk away, quietly, with your dignity intact. Let them wonder where you went. Let them sit in the empty space you once filled and realize too late what loyalty feels like once it's gone. Because if someone has to test your value, they never deserved your truth. And when they finally look around and realize they lost someone irreplaceable, you won't be there to witness it. You'll be too far ahead. Living, breathing, becoming the person you were always meant to be before they made you doubt it. Not broken, not bitter, just better. A future, now reduced to eating grocery store ramen at a chipped kitchen counter while Linux judged me from the top of the fridge. I kept telling myself the worst was over, that the damage was done and I'd made the right choice. But healing doesn't come with a timestamp. It comes with quiet interrogations and invisible bruises. On the weekends, I walked. Miles, sometimes. Through Capitol Hill, through Pike Place, down to the waterfront. I watched couples take photos with paper coffee cups and dogs and sweaters. I listened to street musicians play jazz to no one in particular. It was a strange kind of peace, being nowhere I'd ever been before, with no one who recognized my face. I could have been anyone, and that, in a way, was the first breath of freedom. But the silence had a sound. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. It lived in the pause after I poured coffee and realized I wasn't making a second cup. It echoed in the absence of text from anyone wondering where I was. Not my old friends. Not her. No one. And I'd chosen that intentionally. I'd gone off the map, untethered myself from every familiar name and number. But freedom and loneliness? Sometimes they look too much alike in low light. The hardest nights were the ones where I dreamed of her. Not dramatic dreams, just flashes. Her walking barefoot into our kitchen, humming some melody she never finished. Her laughing with her head thrown back as Scout jumped up on the couch. The way her eyes softened when she said, "You always make me feel safe." I'd wake up with her name on my lips and anger boiling behind my teeth. How dare she haunt me after everything? How dare my subconscious still believe she was home? I stopped asking why one night after a rainstorm that left the streets slick and shining. I was walking back from a bookstore with a used Murakami novel tucked under my arm when I saw a couple wrapped around each other under the awning of a closed shop, sharing a kiss like the world wasn't watching. And I realized asking why was keeping me tied to a question she never cared to answer. Why she did it. Why she posted that profile. Why she needed to test me when I had already offered her my whole life without hesitation. None of it mattered anymore. It wasn't my burden to carry. The real question, the one that mattered, wasn't, why did she betray me? It was, what am I building now, in the rubble of what she left behind? That question hit differently. It turned something inside me. I started journaling again. Just late-night entries on an old laptop, no structure, no goal. But the words came fast and honest. Thoughts I hadn't given voice to since college. Sometimes bitter. Sometimes raw. Always real. That small ritual became my tether. My sanity. I wasn't writing about her. I was writing about me. The version of myself I was trying to remember. Or maybe, to reinvent. It's funny how the absence of noise can be louder than any argument. When you don't tell anyone you're hurting, they assume you're okay. And that assumption becomes a prison. The barista doesn't know. Your coworkers don't see it. The world keeps moving, and your silence convinces everyone you're fine. But you're not. You're a man who once believed love was enough, who now knows that sometimes love is just the illusion that makes betrayal more poetic. I stopped asking why. I started asking what next. That was the beginning of the shift. Not a full healing. Not yet. But a pivot. A refusal to stay broken. Because no one was coming to rescue me. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need rescuing. It had been 6 weeks since I vanished. 6 weeks of no texts, no emails, no pings or pongs or panicked calls from the woman who once swore she couldn't sleep without hearing my voice. I kept my phone turned off most of the time. I only used it for bank verifications, job alerts, and sometimes Google Maps when I wandered too far from familiarity. It stayed face down on my kitchen counter, collecting a thin film of dust. The only thing that vibrated more than once a week was the refrigerator motor. It was blissfully quiet, until it wasn't. I still remember the day it rang. Not buzzed. Not notified. Rang. The screen lit up like a ghost had found me. Unknown number. Not a Texas area code. I hesitated for a second. It could have been a recruiter. Or spam. But something about the number stirred something under my ribs. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. I stood there afterward, staring at the missed call notification like it might burn a hole in my palm. Then the voicemail pinged. I almost didn't listen. But I did. Hey, Mason. It's Kelsey. Look, I don't know where you are, and I'm not asking you to come back. But she's not okay. Aria. She's been driving through cities, leaving flyers, asking baristas if they've seen you. She thinks she saw you in Denver. I don't know if you're alive or hurt or just done with all of us. But if you're alive, at least tell me that. The message ended in that heavy silence people leave when they want to cry but won't let themselves. I listened to it 3 times. Not because I missed Aria, but because the sound of someone else carrying her grief felt like an echo I didn't expect. Kelsey, her best friend, the one who helped plan the engagement party, the one who stayed late helping us choose flower arrangements. She had always been warm, loud, fiercely loyal, a defender of Aria through and through, even when she didn't deserve it. And now she was calling me like she wasn't even sure if I was breathing. I didn't call back, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I wasn't ready to be real again. I sat down at my desk. An old folding table I'd salvaged from a second-hand shop down the block and opened a new email account. Something anonymous. Something without a name or picture or history. I called it r.writer.journal@gmail.com. No one knew what it meant, but I did. The R was for reboot. For writer, the name I stopped recognizing when it became hers to mispronounce in social settings. For the journal I was about to start again, now not for memory but for survival. That same night, I opened a blank document and stared at it for a long while before typing the title, The Price of Being a Backup Plan. The words came fast after that. I wrote like a man unpacking debris after a fire. Not to make sense of it, but to record the damage. I wrote about the night I found her profile. About what it felt like to see our dog in the background of a lie. About the smell of pancakes the morning after. About the silence I'd chosen like armor. I didn't censor anything. I didn't try to make myself noble. I wrote the ugly parts too. The way I kept loving her even after she chose the world. The way I hated myself for not hating her enough. The way I still turned my head when I saw someone with her hair color in public. I wrote until my hands cramped and my eyes burned. And then I saved it, closed the laptop, and sat still for a long time in the quiet. That was the night I realized something strange. I didn't miss Aria. I missed who I thought she was. I missed the woman who used to wear my shirts and drink coffee on the fire escape. I missed the idea of a partner who believed in me the way I believed in her. But the real Aria, the one who made a dating profile while measuring her ring size, the one who let me plan a wedding she never fully intended to show up to, I didn't miss her at all. I missed feeling seen. I missed being chosen. I missed myself. So I kept writing, night after night. Small essays. Private entries. Journal-style ramblings about memory and hurt, and how heartbreak makes you forget your own name. I never planned to show them to anyone. It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't even for healing. It was for presence. For proof that I hadn't disappeared. Not really. Sometimes I thought about Kelsey's message. The way her voice cracked on the word alive. I wondered what she thought had happened. If she imagined I'd joined some startup in Dubai. If she feared I'd jumped off a bridge. If she hated me for leaving without a word. I wondered if she knew, really knew, what it felt like to be someone's placeholder. To give everything while the person beside you cataloged other options like you were a coat they weren't sure they wanted to wear all season. I hoped she did. Eventually. But I still didn't call. Because I was still a ghost. Not the haunting kind. The quiet kind. The kind who walks unseen through the city while the rest of the world keeps spinning. Some nights I'd imagine Aria staring at the ring box, reading the letter. Maybe she cried. Maybe she cursed me. Maybe she called Kelsey and said, I messed up, and Kelsey nodded because she already knew. Maybe she drove to Denver because she couldn't sit still in the house we shared, couldn't bear the silence left behind by a man who once filled every corner with certainty. That wasn't my concern anymore. Because I wasn't coming back. She'd made her choice when she posted that bio. I made mine when I walked away without slamming the door. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. Because sometimes, the only thing louder than anger is absence. And I had finally learned how to be loud in silence. The call came on a Thursday. Late. I was standing in line at a tiny corner faux shop 2 blocks from my apartment, debating whether to get extra basil or just surrender to the default. My phone buzzed in my back pocket, just once, and I figured it was another job alert or spam text. But when I glanced at the screen, I froze. It wasn't an unknown number this time. It was Eli Navarro. I hadn't spoken to Eli since before I left Texas. He was supposed to be one of my groomsmen. We'd met in college, both engineers with the same sarcasm problem and a shared addiction to fantasy football. He was one of the few guys I trusted completely. The kind of friend who didn't need daily calls to remain loyal. But he hadn't reached out when I disappeared. Neither had anyone else. Which, honestly, I preferred. So seeing his name light up my phone felt strange. Like a voice from a former life suddenly calling through the fog. I stepped out of line, the smell of beef broth and lime clinging to my jacket as I answered. Eli. A beat. Then his voice, familiar and cautious. Yeah, man. Mason. Damn. I wasn't sure you'd even pick up. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. He sighed. Listen, I don't want to stir anything up. I'm not calling to take sides. But I thought you should hear this. That sentence alone tightened something in my chest. I leaned against the cold brick wall, trying to steady my breath. She told us, he continued. Aria. She came clean. Said you left. Said you knew about the dating profile. Said you found it but never confronted her. I closed my eyes. I could hear traffic in the distance, the low murmur of a city that didn't know me well enough to care. She said it was a test, Eli went on. That she posted it just to. I don't know. To see if there was something better out there. But that she hoped she wouldn't find it. I almost laughed. Almost. A test? I said quietly, more to myself than to him. She wanted to test if she could cheat on me without technically cheating. Yeah, Eli said, his voice soft now. She told the group a few nights ago. Said she didn't think you'd find it. That it was just curiosity. She said every guy she talked to made her realize how much he loved you. That's when I did laugh. Not loud. Just that broken, breathless sound people make when the absurdity outweighs the ache. She went shopping, I said, hoping she wouldn't want to buy. But she still shopped. Eli didn't reply right away. I think he knew there wasn't much he could say. He wasn't calling to fix anything. He was calling because guilt was a heavy thing, and maybe hearing it from him would somehow validate what I already knew. I didn't thank him. I didn't curse him either. I just stood there and let the truth settle like dust around me. Because that was the thing, confirmation didn't change anything. It didn't hurt less now that I had her reasons. If anything, it made it worse. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. A calculated one. She had gambled with the relationship we built, placed our future on the roulette table of her self-doubt, and hoped that losing would somehow prove she loved me. It wasn't love. It was cowardice. Dressed in modern dating logic and emotional immaturity. You don't test love. You don't test loyalty. You don't try to tempt yourself with fantasy and then act shocked when the person you were supposed to protect finds out you were drafting escape routes. I figured you'd want to know, Eli said. I mean, you didn't deserve that. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Thanks, I said. Not because I felt grateful, but because he hadn't lied to me. Not like she had. He hung up after that. We didn't talk about meeting up. Didn't reminisce about old memories. We weren't those people anymore. The phone call was just a thread in the unraveling tapestry that was now my history with her. I went back into the faux shop and ordered without tasting any of it in my head. I carried the container home, untouched, and placed it in the fridge like a ritual I couldn't commit to completing. That night, I opened a blank page and wrote down everything Eli had said. Not for revenge. Not because I thought I'd forget, but because I needed it out of me. She tested me to see if I was enough. She hoped strangers would show her I was her safest bet. She didn't cheat because she failed. She cheated because she wanted to confirm her win. I wrote until the cursor blinked at the edge of the page like it was tired too. Then I closed the file, got into bed, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about her hands, her voice, the way she used to say, I love how safe you feel. And I realized something. It wasn't that I was safe. It was that I was steady, consistent, predictable. And she didn't know what to do with a man who didn't make her question her worth, so she made him question his. That's the cruel part. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the idea that my reliability became boring to someone who once claimed it was her home. The next morning, I woke up early and hiked Discovery Park. The air was wet and sharp, and the trail was mostly empty. I didn't bring music. I didn't bring company. Just my boots and my body and the echo of Eli's voice in my head. Somewhere near the cliffs, I stopped and looked out over the sound. The water was endless and gray, and the sky was barely brighter. But I felt something shift in my chest. Not peace. Not yet. But distance. Not from her. From the wound. And that distance, however fragile, felt like the first real step towards something honest. I wasn't trying to be found. That's the part people never understand. I wasn't hiding behind some elaborate alias or fleeing across borders with a fake passport. I was just gone. Intentionally quiet. Fully detached. So when it happened, when the past walked right into the bookstore and spoke my name, it felt less like coincidence and more like the final test of my resolve. It was a Saturday afternoon in Capitol Hill. Overcast, a thin drizzle ghosting the sidewalk. I had just picked up a used copy of Kafka on the Shore, something about it pulling at me lately. The surreal, the quiet unraveling, the dislocation of identity. It made sense in a way my real life no longer did. I was halfway through a paragraph about fish raining from the sky when I heard it. My name. Not shouted. Not even called. Just spoken. Soft. Familiar. Like someone rehearsing it after months of silence. Mason. I turned before I could stop myself. Reflex. And there she was. Arya. She looked like time had paused somewhere in the middle of pain. She hadn't aged, but she wore exhaustion like it was stitched into her skin. Her hair was damp from the rain, curled slightly at the ends, not in the polished way she used to wear it, but wild, untamed. There were bags under her eyes. Her jacket was wrinkled, and her expression, God, her expression, looked like she'd seen a ghost, and it was me. I knew I'd find you, she said, her voice cracking on the last word. I stood there, book in hand, the weight of everything we never said pressing into the narrow aisle between us. I didn't move, didn't answer right away, because she hadn't found me. I found me, and she had no right to that revelation. I finally closed the book and set it back on the shelf. Calmly, like we weren't detonating something sacred in public. You didn't find me, I said. You followed the pieces I left behind. That's not the same thing. Her face twisted, pain, guilt, hope, all colliding in the space between us. I've been looking for you, she said. For weeks. Denver. Portland. Seattle. I thought maybe. You thought maybe I'd still be the man who waited, I interrupted. The one who'd listen. Who'd stay. Who'd forgive. She blinked. Swallowed hard. Her lip trembled the way it used to when she was about to spiral. I just need time, she whispered. Just 30 minutes. I laughed softly. You don't get 30 minutes. You used up every second the moment you swiped right on someone else. Her shoulders dropped like gravity had returned in full force. I made a mistake, Mason. No, I said, sharper now. You made a decision. Don't call it a mistake just because it didn't give you what you wanted. People were starting to glance in our direction, polite, awkward flickers of attention. The cashier cleared his throat. A barista in the attached cafe pretended not to stare. She tried again, stepping forward. I thought I was losing myself. I needed to feel something. And I didn't know how to say that without hurting you. So you did the thing that would hurt the most, I said. You created an exit while pretending you were still invested. You wrote a dating bio about matching energy while I was mapping out our vows. She wiped at her cheek. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. Maybe both. Everyone I met, no one was you. And that's when I realized that you already had everything you needed and you threw it away anyway. I shook my head. I'm not your mirror, Arya. I'm not here to reflect the version of you miss. She looked like she wanted to sink through the floor, but instead she stood there, shaking, vulnerable. The girl who used to be the woman I loved. I loved you, she said, voice cracking like glass. I still do. I wanted those words to matter. Wanted them to dig into my chest and unearth something salvageable. But they didn't. Because love without loyalty is noise. And I'd had enough noise. Testing someone you love to see if they're enough, I said slowly, clearly, means you already believe they're not. You were looking for an upgrade, Arya. And now that you've seen what's out there, you're crawling back to what felt stable. That's not true, she said quickly. Desperate. You don't know what I went through after you left. And you don't know what I went through before I left, I replied. While you planned centerpieces and swiped on strangers. While I smiled across the dinner table and wondered why your eyes didn't land on me the way they used to. Her silence was confirmation. Not agreement, just the lack of defense. I stepped back. Just a few inches. But it felt like miles. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just done. You don't get to rewrite the ending now that you're uncomfortable with the silence you earned. But can we, Jay?